Before we begin, I was actually already planning on doing an entirely different video about Iran, talking about Operation Ajax, and subscribe because that actually has a lot to do with what has happened more recently with Iran. But I've decided to put that video on hold for next time because this event that happened way more recently is honestly insane. As of recording this, I have 3 subscribers, so if you want to know more about how the CIA created a coup in Iran to kick out their prime minister for oil, yeah, subscribe, but let's get into it. On May 19th, 2024, a Bell Model 212 helicopter carrying 8 people crashed near the town of Julfa, bordering Iran and Azerbaijan. Inside that helicopter was the president of Iran, Ebrahim Raisi, and some other people who don't really matter too much to this video, let's be real. I don't really need to draw out what happened here, you guys already know, Ebrahim died. But today I'll be talking about exactly who this now former president of Iran was, and if his death was foul play, or just a little oopsie. This is the story of Ebrahim Raisi, the Butcher of Tehran. Ebrahim Raisi was born in 1960, making him 63 at the time of his death. During the early 1980s, he became a prosecutor in Karaj, the capital of the county in Iran called Karaj. In 1985, he was appointed as the deputy prosecutor in Tehran, which is Iran's capital. The deputy prosecutor is a person who oversees the entire prosecutor's office, so he's kind of like the manager of everybody who prosecutes criminals, or just people Iran isn't a big fan of. Speaking of people that Iran isn't a big fan of, let's get on to... Raisi was one of the 4 people involved in a committee who executed a bunch of political prisoners during the year of 1988. Yes, 1 year, and a lot of people died. There isn't a 100% conclusive number on how many people this committee had executed, but it is likely in the thousands. This is where Raisi received the title the Butcher of Tehran. Basically, if you were part of a leftist group who the government didn't really agree personally with you, you were probably going to get executed. The number ranges by some counts from like 2,000 to as high as like 30,000 people over the course of 5 months. So this 4-person committee was having 200 people executed every day, at least by the higher estimates. We don't actually know exactly. The prisoners were hanged from forklifts in 30-minute shifts just to get through all those silly little executions as quickly as possible. The families of the deceased were not informed about where their dead relatives were buried. After a failed presidential election in 2017, where he received nearly 40% of votes, allegedly, Raisi realized he hadn't rigged the election hard enough and fixed that mistake in the 2021 election. In 2021, he won the election, gaining around 60% of the votes in his favor. About 15% of the ballots were completely thrown out during this election, as millions of voters submitted blank ballots in protest of an election they believed was rigged in Raisi's favor. But hey, 60% is still more believable than some rigged elections where people get like 99.8% of votes, so at least he did a good job there. There were nearly 600 candidates who ran in the 2021 election in Iran, but due to a rule where the government can arbitrarily select the people they actually feel get to run, about a month before, only 7 of those people were actually approved. The day before the actual polling day, where people could actually submit their ballots, 3 of those 7 people pulled out of the election, with candidate Mohsen, that guy, remarking that the current government would align the sun, moon, and the heavens to make one particular person president. So what did Ebrahim Raisi do during his presidency that would make the CIA want to allegedly crash his helicopter, or whatever they did? We can get into the theories later. One of the first things Raisi did that was a little questionable was to appoint a man by the name of Ahmad Vahidi, who had been condemned by Argentina in that country that's been in the news lately that I don't really want to name because YouTube might get mad at me, but he was condemned by those 2 countries for being allegedly involved in a terrorist attack that killed 85 people. Argentina even sent out a red notice on him, which basically means, hey, police around the world, can we just arrest this guy? He's not good. He also appointed another guy that was involved in the same bad event. Beginning in mid-September of 2021, protests flared around Iran after a woman named Mahsa Amini died under suspicious circumstances while in the hospital. Amini was a woman who had opposed the law of women in Iran being required to wear the hijab, and mysteriously, under police custody, she died in a hospital. So people thought that was a little suspicious. Raisi also was continuously delaying talks with the United States over the quote-unquote Iran nuclear deal, also known as JCPOA, or the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, which was a deal to stop Iran from producing nuclear weapons. So they were making nuclear weapons. Raisi also met with the Chinese leader known as Xi Jinping and agreed with him to boost relations between China and Iran. Basically, he's colluded with multiple countries and groups that the United States government doesn't really like too much. Which is why when he died, like 3 days ago as of recording this video, people were immediately very suspicious. Ebrahim Raisi was in Azerbaijan for the inauguration of 2 hydroelectric dams he had been working on jointly with the government of Azerbaijan. After that event, he was scheduled to fly around 80 miles south to the city of Tabriz in Iran to inaugurate an oil refinery. Around halfway through the flight at 13:30 or 1:30 p.m., Raisi's helicopter was forced to make quote-unquote a hard landing. Raisi was traveling in a convoy of 3 helicopters, and the other 2 helicopters didn't land with him because they literally couldn't even find him. That's how bad the weather was. They looked around for him for 20 minutes and then flew away and had to conduct emergency landings of their own. Rescue teams were quickly sent to rescue Raisi, but were unable to make it to him due to the weather conditions, with fog and rain making it difficult to reach the crash site. Now, the Iranian government claimed they had contacted 2 people on board Raisi's helicopter and said that the crash was likely not too bad as a result. But around 6 in the morning the following day, the rescue teams finally reached Raisi's helicopter after spotting it from the air. So 15.5 hours had passed since the crash, meaning it was already very unlikely anyone would still be alive unless they actually had some like supplies or something. And yeah, they didn't find anybody alive, which is funny because the Iranian government said that 2 of them had made radio contact. But now let's get into some of the theories around the crash itself and if this was more than just an accident. There are a few theories that don't involve foul play, so I'll cover those first before I get onto some of the more conspiratorial ones. The first theory is just that the weather was bad and the pilots made a mistake which led to the crash. If it's foggy, it can be really easy to crash a helicopter because you just can't see. And that kind of thing has happened many times before with even military helicopters in the US. And helicopters fly really low to the ground normally, so it can be very difficult to right the helicopter in the event you oversteer or the wind flips you or something like that. Second theory is what I'll call the hard landing theory. Basically, for whatever reason, the pilots or someone on the helicopter wanted to actually land the helicopter. This is supported by the Iranian government saying that they had a hard landing, which sort of implies they wanted to land or were forced to land instead of just crashing. Maybe they just landed a little too hard. If you look at the area, I don't know how you land there. There's trees everywhere. So I really don't believe that this was the case. I think they just crashed, but we'll talk about it. The third theory I'll call the theory of equipment failure. I mentioned at the beginning of this video that the helicopter Raisi was in was a Bell Model 212. This model was actually so old they used it in the Vietnam War, and you could probably tell it just from looking at it. Yeah, it's one of those helicopters. We're not exactly sure when they purchased this helicopter, but it could have been like 40 years ago. So yeah, they could maintain it and replace parts of the helicopter, but with the US sanctions on Iran, it might be hard to get the exact parts. And also, why are you flying your president in a helicopter from like the 70s, dude? Just buy him a new helicopter. Now, the fourth theory is the theory of foul play, and I'm going to go over a lot of parties who could have done it, and then I'm going to go over how they could have done it, basically. I'll narrow it down to 3 groups being the most likely to kill Raisi. The first one is the CIA. The second one is the country that starts with I that I probably can't say. And the third is another politician in Iran, which I don't really think is too likely. Could be a possibility. As I said earlier, the United States definitely doesn't like the countries Raisi was getting all buddy-buddy with. Neither would the I country, as Iran has allegedly sent missiles and drones to that country. And of course, there is the possibility that someone in Iran didn't really like Raisi or wanted his power or something. I'm not saying that the vice president did it or something like that. I don't think that's actually very likely. So how could they have done it? Well, any of these groups could have paid off the pilot to do it on purpose, but the pilot also died, so I don't really believe that. They could have tampered with the helicopter to make it crash. They could have made the weather bad on purpose. Some people think that people can change the weather. I don't know. I don't know anything about that. Maybe I'll make a video on that in the future. It actually is such an interesting topic, but that is way more off the deep end than this current topic. So we'll talk about that in a different video, maybe. I don't know. They could have even like shot down the helicopter with a missile, but there was a convoy. I think they would have, seen a missile. But so what is my final verdict on this situation? I would honestly say, and this is crazy, but I don't think this was foul play. But I wouldn't be too surprised, right? The weather was really bad if you look at it, and it looks like they just crashed. It just looks like they crashed. So yeah, well, this is really, really convenient for the CIA, and also they've tampered with Iranian politics before. I think they might not have done it this time, but I love to hear your opinions on this in the comments. And if you guys enjoyed, make sure to smash that like button, subscribe if you're new, but I'll see you all later. Bye-bye.